Howdy folks, welcome to part one of the six-part video series, A Beginner's Guide to Public Speaking with me, Jack McCurdy, and my co-host, Peter Chittum. Hi Peter.
Hey Jack, thanks for having me.
Of course, you're welcome. Thank you for joining me and helping prepare this guide. So part one, we are going to be looking at why public speaking is important for your career. Now, for me, public speaking isn't just for Mark Benioff or TED Talk veterans or people like me waffling for a living on podcasts. It is a core leadership skill and one of the best ways to grow your influence both inside and outside of your organization, and also has some huge personal benefits if you really embrace public speaking and walk down that path. Peter, you did a large amount of public speaking yourself, still do a large amount of public speaking. What's your perspective and take on what it's done for you and how it's progressed your career?
Yeah, and the interesting thing for me is that, I've never had a point in my life where some kind of public presentation wasn't part of my career. So I don't remember a time when I wasn't standing in front of audiences, and partly that's because I have a theater degree. So I began my life as a chorister. The first time I actually presented, I guess you could say, but performed something, I was 7 years old, and I have never stopped. So, here 45 years on, standing in front of an audience and sharing something, whether that's something artistic or something informational, is kind of second nature to me. But part of the reason I want to do this is because I understand that is not everyone else's lived experience. And, I think one of the most important things that I can share is that the only way you get better at doing this is doing it.
Absolutely. It might not be baked into everybody's DNA like it is yours and is now mine. My public speaking journey is very different. I wasn't exposed to external public speaking or conference public speaking until 4 years ago was my first virtual event that I did. And it's only now that I'm really realizing the true value and true power of being a confident and calm public speaker. Starting with internally, clear, confident communication inside organizations is really important, not only to have alignment on what you're doing and communicating to the business what you're doing. It helps you share ideas that can gain traction, lead effective meetings and presentations, and inspire and align the team around shared goals. If you're able to convey those in the right way, you can propel your organization to better results. And that's certainly something that I've seen in my experience as I've become a more confident public speaker in the external realm. It's helped me convey ideas internally and guide my thoughts into wider conversations across the business.
I'm really curious, do you have a benchmark for that, or even a sense for what was life for Jack McCurdy before he went and started doing public speaking and started sharing stories in public? What was an example of what was like before, and then what's an example of what's changed now? Do you have any anecdotes like that?
I do. I am a networker at heart. So prior to being in a tech job, I spent 3 years as a recruiter, and I didn't do any public speaking engagements or things like that, but I did spend a lot of time at networking events. So being in communities, building relationships with communities in, the free form, happy hour styles, user group style meetings that many of us will be familiar with being in the Salesforce community. It was about taking those skills where you don't realize you're presenting when you're talking to people and you're networking, but that's one of those things that I feel if you have a strong foundation in doing by just being curious and talking to people and sharing perspectives in an environment like that where you might not necessarily know the person that you're talking to. You're meeting a new person for the first time. How you build that connection with them on a one-on-one basis, I think, is one of the baseline skills that will help you appreciate how you convey information to a larger audience or a room of people. And 3 years as a salesperson, convincing, I think sales is one of those underappreciated skills that a lot of people don't realize they need in organizations. I think if you are a good salesperson or have had some type of sales training, that goes a long way to, number one, building confidence, and number two, understanding what interests and motivates other people to inspire them to action. I think that's one of the core things that you're trying to do in any presentation or public speaking engagement, is spur somebody to action, to take action based on whatever your topic is about, whether it's encouraging people to use more flows or do testing in DevOps. If you have those sales skills, then you have an inherent ability to convey information in a good way. So I would actually encourage anybody as a baseline to do some kind of sales training or look at some sales coaching. Everybody should do the sales modules on Trailhead, I think, is a great place to start.
That's a really good shout. I've never even considered looking at those. So that's something I might take to heart.
Yeah. So yeah, that's where it starts for me. And one of the biggest things, and the supporting document that we've written, it does a lot of things for you personally. But when I started public speaking, I did my first engagement at London's Calling virtual during the COVID days, 2021. Those experiences and the nerves that you get, and I still get nerves from public speaking engagements. They never go away, but I think that's a good thing because you care and you're invested in what you're presenting and how your audience is going to receive it. You want to do a good job, and you do feel great when you walk off stage. I don't know if there's any better feeling for me than walking off stage having nailed a presentation.
Yeah, I think, the nerves, like I said, I don't remember a time I've not like done some kind of performance or public presentation in my life. And, the way I think of it is like nerves are just part of the ride, there's a fine line between like anxiety and excitement. And I think it's about, riding that line and just, doing what you can to sort of reassure the anxiety side, that like the exciting side is gonna be better. But I think, we'll get to a lot of like what helps make that happen when we get to the prep side of this conversation.
For sure. Any additional benefits to public speaking in careers for you?
Well, so even though I have this like long history of standing in front of people, my work had always been in front of very small audiences. When I got to working in the IT world from my previous life, and so to me, I think the biggest benefit was noticeability and notability in the broader Salesforce community. I had been a trainer in the Salesforce training and certification team, which is now the team that's called Trailhead Academy. So people knew me, and I would get these very deep connections with my students over the course of a week. What I hadn't done prior to working at Salesforce was speaking in front of really large audiences. In my very first Dreamforce, I hadn't even been working at Salesforce for 4 months. I was delivering hands-on training in front of 250 people like 3 times at Dreamforce. That was a very different experience. And repeating that at Dreamforces and then joining the developer relations team, where I was regularly speaking in front of developer groups, conferences, we would do these developer days. To me, the biggest benefit was people began to know who I was without me really trying, except for just standing in front of people and being useful. So I would say, yeah, the biggest benefit, if you have a desire to become more known than just in your immediate working team, or if you feel like that would be a benefit to your career, then absolutely, public speaking will definitely get you that. I would say the extra benefit is the Salesforce community is also so warm and so welcoming. Anybody coming to it with good faith, trying to help, you're going to be welcomed in, and people are going to want you around, and that's a nice feeling. Yeah.
I wholeheartedly agree, and something to be mindful of for anybody taking this journey or taking their next steps. The community will help you. I have had so much support from the community when I've been preparing talks and needed additional context, being able to ask people what their thoughts are, what they think should be included or even excluded from a presentation and what I'm thinking, guidance on slides, and we're going to talk a bit about this in the rest of the series. But at the heart of public speaking, it's about connection. You've learned something valuable. There's probably somebody else that's going to want to hear it and deserves to hear it. It's something that you can use to convey those ideas, and you should see it as your responsibility to share it. You almost have an inherent responsibility to share what you've learned with the wider community, because when we do that, we lift everybody up.
I think the other benefit that occurred to me when we were talking about this also was just the practice of speaking. My experience is that I have my own habits. I say a lot, even though I've been doing this for a long, long time. And even in doing this discussion that we have today, I'm very conscious of that, because it's a habit I've never been able to kick throughout all of these years, right? Doing public speaking gives you an opportunity to become aware of some of these habits that may potentially be inhibiting your communication. So whether that's how you pronounce things, whether, how clearly you pronounce things, some people talk lowly. Getting in front of an audience gives you an opportunity to try new things and to speak in a different way. And the feedback that you can get, you can actually learn about things that may actually be obstacles in your communicating with people that you maybe aren't even aware of. I've actually coached a number of people who, in my team that I led in developer relations, at one point I was the only native English speaker. And to later or lesser, to greater or lesser degrees, I would do little bits of coaching just to tweak. I don't think anybody needs to try or pretend to lose an accent. Accents are a kind of a very rich thing, and for a lot of people, it's not worth the effort, really. If you are getting understood, that's great. But there are little hard edges that you might run into, and I think seeking feedback about that is really important, because oftentimes people may not tell you that unless you go and ask, are there things that I can improve? I'll give you an example. So one of the folks who I worked with is German, and he liked to use that word folks a lot as a kind of a gender neutral way of talking about a lot of people, instead of saying guys, which, for a period of time, and probably still, we're sort of discouraged from using in a mixed gender situation, right? And so he would say folks, folks, folks. Unfortunately, with his accent, it sounded like another very rude word that he just wasn't aware of. And, so I just pointed this out to him, and, it was just a little tweak that, if that had been in a public speech, it would have just been very, very distracting, right? And so those are the kind of things that I'm talking about, where, in this community, we have huge numbers of people who are not native English speakers, and that's fine. We need to hear from everybody, and, you can have very competent English skills and have an accent, nothing wrong with that. But if there's something about that accent distracting, you may not know it until you go and actually speak with somebody and get some feedback about that. And, as part of the process of practicing and public speaking, eliciting that feedback is a really great way to learn what are these little hard edges or, sharp edges that might be getting in the way of better communication.
No, totally agree. As somebody with a mutt of an accent these days, slightly Irish, slightly English, slightly American, it's something that it's funny. I play a lot of golf, and one of my playing partners recently have gone, "Are you American? Are you Scottish? Are you Irish? Are you this? Are you that? Are you Australian?" Like I've had it all at this point.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that is something that I picked up from being involved in community for so long, that it's this weird kind of blend, but it's a good conversation starter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, and something distinctive. And you mentioning the has made me realize when I say it now, which is also really interesting.
Actually, one more thing on the accent thing. Another person who worked for me, when I first started working with him, when he first started reporting to me, one of the things he had been focusing on or thinking about was he had wanted to reduce the I don't want to say the word harsh, but the magnitude of his accent. That's probably the best way to put it. And or even remove it. Like he wanted to get rid of it as much as possible. And I actually encouraged him to rethink that, because he was very understandable. Again, language and communication is about, did I convey the information? And the reality is, English is kind of the language of tech. So we have to understand that when we have people speaking in, for what us is our native language, we are going to get lots and lots of different accents. And I think somehow trying to quash all of those, or if you are a non-native English speaker, or for me, I've given talks in French, I would say, enjoy the difference that your voice brings and embrace it. I tend to make fun of myself a lot as being a non-native French speaker, mostly because it kind of wins people over. Generally, my experience with going and speaking for French audiences is that they really want to help me do French better. And, a little bit of effort on my part is usually met with, a whole lot more effort on their part to understand and, want me to participate in their language. That may be a little bit different for some, English speaking audiences, but at the same time, I think those diverse voices and sounds, there's nothing wrong with those. And in fact, so don't try and, if you're tempted to want to scrub away your accent, don't, just get some feedback and make sure there aren't any little things that are getting in the way of being understood. And just focus on that. Focus on, am I being understood? You'll be fine.
Absolutely. There you have it. That is why public speaking is important to your career, and a couple of anecdotes for how you can approach it and why you should embrace it. Diversity of thought is really, really important in our community. By sharing your voice, you are not only doing something great for yourself, you're doing something fantastic for others as well by sharing your knowledge.